On chapter 15, transition to adulthood, it really tries to bring all of special ed together now at the end, looking at how to get these kids out into the world and all the steps that go with that. And there's three main domains that you'll work with as a teacher and as a parent and even as a student of these kids. And that is, you'll work with employment is a big one. The second one is what type of living, and the third one is rec and leisure. So work, living, and rec and leisure are the three big things, and it tries to come together here. When the student gets to high school, every one of their goals or IEP goals and objectives have to relate to one of these areas in adulthood. And at the beginning, it has a whole bunch of statistics of how unsuccessful they are in these areas and why it has to be so overtly taught to those kids. And so that will be the challenge of the teachers. But it's a great chapter. It gets a little bit long. Please stick with me on it because it's some vital stuff. But it's an insight that really is unknown to us if you're not in the special ed world, the field of transition. Chapter 15, Transition to Adulthood. Chapter 15, that's a transition to adulthood. And it's a big part of special ed. Lots to cover in it. Let's jump right into it here about what it is. This is a big study here that the test will quote and stuff. Ferguson and Ferguson 11, which is a very new study, suggests that adulthood is expressed through autonomy, membership, and change. Make sure you know that one. Adults express their autonomy by self-sufficiency, like financial and emotional resources. They can take care of themselves. Self-determination, completeness. Adults enjoy membership and a form of connectedness with the community, citizenship, activity, affiliations, characterized by change, moving to a new community, going back to school, taking a new job, watching old friends move away, just like you and I, that comparison. Only they need very explicit instructions in this. So they have an entire program, transitioning from high school to the increased privilege and responsibility of adulthood. While difficult for most young people, is especially challenging for youth with disabilities. Skill deficits, limited opportunities created by low expectations or discrimination, and the absence of needed supports. And I think that's a test on a question on the test also. Absence of needed supports are some of the obstacles of good transitions. So first, this is kind of interesting. It takes you into how students with disabilities have fared in the past. And again, I want to remind you this range that we're talking about, from the low incidence disabilities, very severely disabled, to the very high incidence disabilities, the very mild disabled. So with that, we're going to lump those together here and try and make a case for it. So what happens to these students with disabilities when they leave high school and enter the adult world? Do they find work? Where do they live? How do the lives of adults with disabilities compare with expectations of others? So they did this study, more than 75 studies. And then this group here looked at all those, this NLTSI-1 and NLSI-2, funded by the Department of Ed. Your money helped this. Assessed and modified changes of 8,000. They ended up looking at 8,000 youths between 85 and 1987. It was a 10-year study of the experiences of nationally representative samples of 11,000 youth with disabilities. And they were at least in the 7th grade and received special services for the 01 school year. And then they followed them for 10 years. Okay. First of all, so what does it say about high school completion? Well, let's see. Higher rates of problems with the criminal justice system. Yeah, this is really sad. Students who do not complete high school are likely to face more difficulties in adult adjustment for those who do. And you know that. That's not new to you. Special ed students who do not complete high school face lower levels of unemployment and wages than even those that don't have disabilities if they don't complete. They have reduced access to post-secondary education and training opportunities. Why is that? Well, again, because of their ability levels. And then they have higher rates of problems with the criminal justice system. And they have overall less satisfaction in life in general. And that can't be a surprise to you. And parents interviewed from this study indicate that 72% of youth with disabilities complete high school by receiving either a regular diploma or a certificate of completion. 72%. And this isn't looking at files. This is saying they interviewed parents. They tracked down parents of these 8,000 students and checked with them. And I think that's pretty high. That's higher than I thought it would have been. And I don't know, I'm not familiar. In South Dakota here, we don't have this a certificate of completion or a document like that. In South Dakota, my understanding, we only have a diploma or nothing. But major differences were found in high school completion rates by disability, ranging from a high of 95% of students with visual impairments, that was the high, and 56%, that's the low, with behavior disorders and emotional disturbance. And again, when we studied those, we've said those were the hardest group to serve, these behavior disordered kids, right? So studies have reported school dropout rates for secondary students with disabilities ranging from 28 to 37%, more than twice that of peers without disabilities. So that's a problem. And then dropout rates vary considerably by disability type, ranging from 17% of students with autism and visual impairments to 61% with students with emotional behavior disorders. Okay, now let me separate this for you. We're talking about two different things here. One is a dropout that leaves before their time to be a dropout. A not completer means you maybe put your 4 years in, but you never completed. There's really two different things here. It doesn't matter. It's just the terminology here. But to these kids, it doesn't matter. They're going to face exactly the same problems. So let's look at employment. What about employment for kids with disabilities? Well, the same study, NLTS2, I want to make sure I know what that is again. Right here it is. Programs National Longitudinal Transition Studies, 1 and 2, two separate ones. Okay, so the same study here found that 57% of youth with disabilities were working for pay outside the home during the first 4 years after high school. 57% is all, compared to 66% employment rate for the same age in the general population. Now that's a little scary to me. Let me just take you back. 57% of disabilities, 66% were working from pay. Now I'm going to hope that includes, the reason that number's so low is because of college students. But if 66% of non-college kids are working for pay, that's even more of a problem. Employment outside the home by students with disabilities who had completed high school, like received a diploma or certificate, was 61% versus 41% for non-completers. Employment outside the home for students with disabilities who had completed high school, 66 to 41. The three most common types of job held by the youth with disabilities were, and you could guess it, food service, 17%, skilled labor, 11%, and a common cashier, 10%. And again, they took this in those two studies, the national studies by your tax dollars, and they came up with that data. Slightly more than half, 58%, of young adults with disabilities who are employed had full-time jobs. Now, that's exciting, that you would have a youth with disabilities to have a full-time job. And why I say that is because there's twofold to it. One is the income that would come with a full-time job, regardless of what the pay rate is. It's still more than not working full-time. But two, the self-worth that you would have of having a full-time job. And three, a bigger thing to me, having worked with these kids for 6 years in a former life, is it's something to do. Off the streets, off the couch, off the government dole, full-time job, 58%. That's exciting to me. I didn't know it was that high. So youth with disabilities out of high school, 1 to 4 years, earn an average hourly wage of $8.20. And again, that's more than I thought it would be. I know they're going to tell you compared to $9.20 an hour of youth in the general population, but even still, that's a decent wage for students with disabilities that were served with IEPs. Only 44% of working youth with disabilities receive any employment benefits, such as health insurance, sick leave, paid vacation, those. So 44% of working of those. So of this 58%, 44% are employed enough to have those benefits, and that's tough. And here's the Bureau of Labor Statistics report that just 18% of individuals with disabilities at working age were employed versus 64%. So that's a different stat. That's coming from a different place than this national study. Okay. Individuals without disabilities, adults with intellectual development and severe disabilities, are less than likely to be employed. So I'm guessing that most of these people that are employed gainfully have mild disabilities. Exceedingly high unemployment rates for individuals with disabilities are a major factor persisting in high poverty rates for adults with disabilities. And again, you cannot be surprised at that. And that's why most of them live off government subsidies, especially those with severe disabilities. A nationwide survey of Americans with disabilities age 18 to 64 found 3 times as many people with disabilities living in poverty compared with those who don't. And that's, a forgotten stat when we talk about this group. But very hard for kids with disabilities, and really even mild disabilities, as you can see just these statistics, very hard for that group to take care of themselves employment-wise. And that's why I was saying earlier that just having something to do is important. Not that they'll make a lot of money, but just so that they have a reason to get up in the morning and something to do all day or in the evening or whatever, that they can get 40 hours or more in. But their ability to support themselves financially is very low. Statistically, that plays out on several of these tests. Well, what about post-secondary education? What happens to these kids? That's what happens in employment. What about post-secondary? Well, attending college and post-secondary vocational programs greatly increases the likelihood of employment and generally experiences success as an adult in raising earning potential, even for those who have not earned the degree, if they just attended. Now, as you can imagine, in this study, they found that 45% of youth with disabilities had sometime been enrolled in post-secondary education programs since leaving high school, compared to 41% without disabilities. Now, it is shocking to me that what they're saying here, it is a greater percentage than kids without disabilities. 45% youth with disabilities had sometime been enrolled compared to 41%. And again, they're simply studying years 1 to 4 out of high school. Okay, at the time of this interview, 24% of the participants in this study were enrolled in a post-secondary school program. Now, they're not going to distinguish very clearly what that is, because there's a lot of post-secondary programs that are created just for kids with disabilities. A lot of states have created elaborate post-secondary programs to give the kids with disabilities some sense of that. Enrollment in post-secondary programs in this test, participants at some point since leaving high school varied widely by disability category, ranging from 78% with visual impairments to 27% students with intellectual disabilities. And if you have an intellectual disabilities, i.e. mental retardation, that's a pretty high percent. And that's what I'm saying. More than South Dakota, some states have elaborate programs, and we have some in South Dakota where kids can be fairly disabled, and it's a 9-month program, and really the training in it is for independent living, but it's still called a post-secondary program. So I believe that's part of where these numbers are coming from, but I don't know that for sure. But those numbers are good. So we looked at employment, post-secondary education, and community involvement, both positive and negative here. And that's really what's going to carry this whole transition, is those 3 areas. Successful adulthood involves much more than holding a job. It includes becoming independent and an active member of society. And that's where I say it includes. It's got to be more than just that. It has to be this, your connection to the community. Independence for an adult includes the ability to participate in society, have a home, raise a family, and have joys and responsibilities of community. Adults with disabilities face numerous obstacles in day-to-day living that affect where and how they live, how well they can use community resources, and what opportunities they have for social interaction. Just 1/2 49% of young adults in this study had participated in some type of community social activity outside work or school in the preceding year. That's unbelievable to me. That would only be half. And from lessons or classes outside or in a volunteer group, community service. Community this. As with post-school outcome measures, community participation varied greatly by disability, ranging from 82% of youth with visual impairments and 28% of intellectual disabilities. And not, you see, each of these we study, the highest group is the visual impairments. Why? They tend to have, intellectually be the highest functioning group. Who's the lowest functioning group? Yeah, these kids with intellectual disabilities, these kids more severely disabled. So young adults with disabilities are involved with the criminal justice system at a higher rate than the same age peers without disabilities. Overall, 28% of out-of-high school students in this study have been arrested at some time. 28% had been arrested at some time, right? More than twice that of the others. And you don't believe this? Go up to the penitentiary and see how many of the inmates had some learning disability or some type of a disability in school. It's about more than half. The percentage of out-of-high school youth who had arrested ranged across disabilities from a high of 62% with emotional and behavior disorders to, guess what, only 3% of orthopedic impairments. And that tends to be a much higher incidence of, much more severely disabled. So post-school outcome summarized have represented improvements over measures obtained in earlier studies, like this NTS1, and that's the good news. The bad news is there's far too many youths with disabilities leave high school to discover to their dismay and discouragement that the physical and logistical demands of daily life are far more complex than what they had learned in functional math, home and economics, and life skills. And I will tell you this, aside from those, in my experience, it's their interpersonal skills as an adult that caused them to fail just like it did in school. They couldn't get along. They couldn't get along in school, and guess what? They're just sure once they get out of school they can get along, and they run into the exact same problems. So it's not just students with major cognitive limitations or for disabilities who have trouble adjusting to life after school. Former special ed students with high incidence disabilities face significant challenges in every aspect of adult life. It's clear that many secondary students and recent school leavers do not view themselves as ready for adulthood. Only about 60% of youth with disabilities, age 15 to 19, who participated in that second study reported that they thought of themselves as being able to handle challenges or feeling the useful and important. Okay? 60% felt that way. Now, they don't say what percentage of the youth without disabilities feel like they're useful and can handle challenges. My guess is there's a great number of those also, but 60% is a high number. When you think back to your exit from high school, how well did you feel prepared for the challenges ahead, and did you feel useful and important? So let's flip back here and just review this a little bit. So this study from 2000-2001 on 72% of students with disabilities graduating from high school and either a regular or certificate of completion, and that's not that bad a number, I don't think, compared to the others. Employment status, unemployment rate for young adults with disabilities is 57%. When they've been out of school during those first 4 years, and 45% of youth with disabilities enrolled in post-secondary programs compared to 41% of youth without disabilities, which I think is an amazing stat. But I think this one is a little hyperinflated based on what they call or what they determine is a post-secondary education program. Because I know the one we have in South Dakota, up in Aberdeen, is just a small thing of preparing for independent living, and we call it post-secondary. But I don't know that for sure how that's determined, and the text does not elaborate on that at all. So here's that thing, and you got to know this for the test. National Longitudinal Transition Studies 1 and 2. 1 and 2 at 2 different times with your tax dollars. And here's what a community involvement. 49% of young adults participate in some type of community social activities outside of work or school or proceeding. And I'm going to guess of kids without disabilities, that's much, much higher, even though it does not give that in the text. And 28% of out of high school youth have been arrested. Okay, that's a high number, over a quarter at some time, compared to 12% of youth in the general population. I think that number is high. Why do I think that's high? Because in my world, when I grew up, I didn't know anybody had been arrested. I graduated in class of 44, and one that I know of was arrested. So that seems high. But having worked in a low-income school and having run an employment program for kids with disabilities, I know this seems low to me. That I would thought that number was high. At least it seemed like it. Okay. And only 60% of youth with disabilities, age 15, reported that they thought of themselves as able to handle challenges and feeling useful and important. So here is number 1, right here. You weigh in on this, how you felt about your preparedness to handle these challenges when you left school, and how you felt about feeling useful and important. Now, I know you felt useful and important, but if you would rate yourself, let's do it this way. Rate yourself on a 1 to 10 scale and make a comment, 1 being not prepared and a 10 being fully prepared, how you felt leaving school as far as being prepared for an adult world. That's number 1. Go. So here's the transition service models. And this is a big one to Will's Bridges model to school work transition. He had 3 levels: a generic, a time-limited one, and an ongoing support one, based on how disabled they were. And Halpern's 3-dimensional has 3 domains: residential environments, their interpersonal network, and meaningful employment. So these are what I would consider experts in this field that they're citing here. We'll look at those in a second here. And then ID and transition services is a process involving coordination, delivery, and transfer of services from school to post-secondary education agencies. So once they leave school, once a student was what we would call in the business age out, now their support needs to be picked up by agencies. And, you know, yes, there's some kids with mild disabilities that don't need support, but for the most part, kids on IEPs in school need some kind of support beyond school. Sometimes it can be the parents. It depends on the amount, how disabled they are. All right? So, here is IDEA. They get a say in it. Let me flip back here. Where's those transition models there? Oh, right here. Congress first authorized funding for secondary ed transition services in 1983. So that was the first federal dollars that came. And again, here's a public law, 98-199. All right. Remember what that stands for? Let me give it to you. PL stands for, say it, public law. And 98 stands for the 98th Congress. And 199 stands for the 199th piece of legislation that they passed. So in 84, Madeline Will, who is kind of an icon in the educational field, director of the Office of Special Ed and Rehab Services, proposed a model of transition service that encompassed 3 levels. Each concept is a bridge between secondary SPED and adult employment. Each level, generic, time limited, and ongoing support, differed in the nature and extent of the services an individual with disabilities needs and make successful transition. While Will's Bridges model of school to work transition showed that the federal government recognized the need to improve employment outcomes for special ed students, many special educators thought that it was perspective on transition was too limited. So here comes Halpern. First we had Will here, and now Halpern's. Let me keep that up there. Helper in 85, Will wrote in 84. Here's Helper in 85, said yours is too limited, and so wrote that it's a mistake to focus on adult employment as a sole purpose in outcome of transition services. Living successfully in one's community should be the primary target of the services. Halpern proposed a transitional model that directed Will's generic time-limited and ongoing support service toward helping students with disabilities adjust to adult life in the community in these three domains: the quality of residential environment, adequacy of social and interpersonal networks, friends, hardest one I think, and then meaningful employment. And later in the lecture here we're going to take a long, deep look at employment. But right now we're just establishing what is this transitional service. So Halpern's view of secondary ed for students with disabilities must focus on all domains but don't functionally greatly influenced. So that's the other thing that's going to come back. This is all going to come back as IEP goals on your IEP for a student with disabilities, and instruction. All of the instruction, once they reach the age of transition, which is 16, all instruction has to lead to one of these goals for transitioning. Okay, let's see how that plays out. So, IDEA defines transition services as this: a coordinated set of activities for a child with a disability that is designed to be within results-oriented process, and that is a $3 word that's hard to stand up to. It's a $3 word that's very hard to stand up to. Results-oriented process. That is focused on improving the academic and functional achievement. You know, with our regular students, it's about improving academics, but here they have to be functional. A child with a disability, facilitate a child's movement from school to post-school activities, including post-secondary education, vocational education, integrated employment, continuing adult education, adult services, independent living. Now, that you get to bring that whole thing in here. And this will be your number 2. Maybe I have that here. Oh, it has it. I'm sorry. You don't have to do number 2 here. It's all right here. Results-oriented process based upon the student's individual needs and preference to facilitate movement to post-school activities in post-secondary ed, vocational ed, integrated employment, continuing adult ed, adult services, independent living, and community participation. We are going to take a look at all of these areas. IDEA gives you this definition, and now you get to operationalize it. Ask the special ed teacher, especially if you're a secondary teacher, a secondary special ed, meaning a middle school, high school are considered secondary, and you get to operationalize these for students, and that's where you will, once they become that age, is you will write IEP goals and correlate every class they take towards one of these. They're going to some type of post-secondary or vocational, employment of some kind of adult ed, adult services, depending on their disability, how they're going to live, and how they can participate with the community. Let me go back here. Here's the transitioning planning. Beginning no later than the first IEP to be in effect when the child is 16 or 14 in some states, and updated annually thereafter. Each child IEP must contain this. So, this is what you're going to get. You get to find out what it is in South Dakota. Here it is, South Dakota. This will be your number 2. Go to South Dakota SPED page and see if you can determine what age we have to begin transition planning in South Dakota. But it's this, the individual transitional planning. Individual transition plan details the regular programming and other supports that will prepare a student for smooth and successful transition to adult life. And when is it? It's the first IEP to be in effect when a child is 16. And updated annually. Each child's IEP must contain the following: appropriate measure, goal, and the post-secondary goals, and the transition services included. Right here. Beginning not later than 1 year before the child reaches the age of majority. A statement that the child has been informed of the child's rights. Let's take a little bit more intensive look at that. So, in effect, so for example, they're 15. You have to have this written not when they turn 16, but 15. And if the state has 14, during their 13th year, so when they hit that birthday, they already have a transition in place. You cannot wait until that 16th one. This portion of the IEP is called the Individual Transition Plan. Details that the curricular programming and other supports will prepare the student for a smooth and successful transition to adult life. The purpose of the ITP is to ensure that all students step into adult life they desire. This doesn't mean locking a student into a life plan. It means that each student will leave high school recognizing his or her personal strengths, knowing where to turn for support. That's a huge problem for kids with disabilities. And looking toward adult life with confidence. Remember, a low percentage felt confident going into adulthood. Well, in transition planning, it's helped them look at adulthood with more confidence. IDEA 2004 and regulations that govern the implementation require IEP teams to follow specific transition plans. Figure 15.1. Let me go show you that. Here's one, and this is this transitional planning process. First, you conduct age-appropriate assessments, like what do they need, what can they do, what do they prefer, what do they like. And then you write measurable goals, like what kind of education and training will they have to reach those goals, what kind of employment do you think they can secure based on their disability or abilities, and what level of living or independent living can they obtain based on their abilities and disabilities and needs. Because again, what makes this conversation really hard is we're talking about kids with very, very mild disabilities to kids with very, very severe disabilities. So it makes this discussion a challenge. It will be easier. It'll come if you're a secondary special ed teacher, it'll become a little clearer. So first you assess, then you write these goals of where you think they can be at adulthoods, you know, what they can do, what they need, and then what services they'll need. That's the next thing. Do they need more instruction? What kind of related services? Remember that list? What kind of community experiences should we provide? What kind of employment and daily living skills should we provide? And what should the course of study be? So, literally, when you sign up for classes in high school, the student does, what classes should they take that lead back to these goals? And you write those right on the IEP. Then you develop annual IEP goals in support of those, like what kind of training do they need, what kind of practice employment or what kind of employment testing do they do, and same with independent living. And then you coordinate these services. You get adult services involved. What are those? Well, the most common one is this one, State Vocational Rehabilitation Department. And then there's different supported living agencies. Can you name one? Well, South Dakota Achieve is one. And then these post-secondary training programs. So you start in high school getting the students involved with these different agencies, and they are called adult service agencies. And then you provide a student with a summary of all those things. That is the process of planning transition. Okay. Were we done back here? Yes. Oh, here, age-appropriate assessments. Like, who am I? What are my unique talents? And there's all kinds of commercial things to help with this process. Just if you're involved with this, just be careful that the student can read whatever it is. Sometimes we give them things that are too reading intensive. So it's a combination of formal and informal assessments. And it really, even if the age is 16, you want to start this discussion long before that. And one of the things you'll find also with transition planning, it's really for parents as much as kids. Parents are the ones that will get real antsy about what's going to happen to their child with disabilities, especially some of the kids that have severe disabilities. Parents start worrying about that from the time they find out their child has a severe disability. What's going to happen to them after I no longer can take care of them? And so that's the other reason we start this conversation a lot of times at 14, so the parents can get used to it. So these formal and informal things are used to determine students' needs, strengths, preferences, interests, terms like current future work, what kind of education, domestic, social environments, all those things. A transition planning inventory is widely used to determine this. 46-item assessment tool asks teachers, parents, and students to rate. Remember, so many things we did in special ed was a rating sheet. So how do they rate the students' current competence across 9, I'm highlighting that for you, 9 transitional domains. And believe me, there's this on the test about these 9 domains. And I think it was here. Yeah, here was the thing I just took you through. Age-appropriate transition assessments, measure of post-secondary goals, transition of service, and these IEP goals. No later than 1 year before the child reaches the age of majority. Hasn't talked about that yet. But 9 transitional domains. Employment, further education and training, daily living, leisure. Examples of items in the self-determination domain are recognized and accepts own strengths and limitations and feelings. All right. So what are measurable post-secondary goals? A post-secondary goal is generally understood to refer to those goals that a child hopes to achieve after leaving secondary school, meaning high school. IDEA requires that each student's IEP contain at least one, requires, I want that in there. IDEA requires each student's IEP contain at least one. So that means no matter how high functioning they are, they still have to have at least one post-secondary goal in education or training. One in employment, and where the appropriate for the student, independent living. So some kids will not need goals for independent living, that they will be able to navigate the world themselves. What you're a little concerned about as the teacher, that this independent living thing does not mean at home. I mean, it can temporarily till they get to a point, but sometimes that's the easiest thing with parents want to just say they'll just live at home. Well, you know from day one that can't be continuously. A post-secondary goal is not the process of pursuing or moving toward a desired outcome. A measurable goal must contain a time frame. So just like on the IEP, you put a time frame in there. Dates. Here's an example. The summer after leaving high school, Lynn will obtain a part-time position working in a pet store. And figure 15.2 contains an example of post-secondary goals. So it's a time thing. When is the time? The summer after leaving high school. And you could write this several years ahead of time, and then you spend high school time preparing Lynn to get and hold and do a job working in a pet store. That's how this works. Parent and family involvement important at all stages of this. We just talked about the last one about early childhood SPED. This too, the parent and family have to be buy-in, have to be a part of this. and they're particularly helpful in assessing and determining the post-secondary goals. Person-centered planning, which entails a variety of strategies to determine the desires, concerns, hopes of these people. And that's hard. And here's what me tell you. We keep talking about their desires, what they want. They don't know. And one of the challenges you have as a transition teacher, as a high school SPED teacher, is help them be realistic. Because I had so many kids coming through that had very unrealistic things. Here's what they wanted to be. You ready for this? For boys, the most common thing is they wanted to be a mechanic. Do you realize how much has changed in the world of being a mechanic in the last 20 years? That 20 and 30 years ago, that anybody with a set of wrenches had some skill to be a mechanic. Now, some of these kids at their highest level could work in an oil change place, but couldn't begin to lift the hood to do any real mechanical work because of the technology and how complicated vehicles have become. Girls, for the most part, wanted one of two things. The most common ones wanted to work with animals. And I have a long theory of why that was. But the other one was they wanted to work in fashion, which also was very unlikely other than working at the Goodwill. Okay. So here's the type of things that would be like goals. So here's Alice, an 8-year-old with a learning disability. Here's her educational training, some type of employment. And this here simply means that she doesn't need anything with independent living, that she will figure that out. We don't need to work on that. But here's this. So let's look at Jody. She's a 17-year-old with mild intellectual disabilities. She has some goals for independent living. We'll assume responsibility for a share of living expenses by saving money earned at work and following a budget set by Jody and her parents. And then Kevin here, he has a significant intellectual disabilities. He plans to stay in school till age 21, and we'll talk about that. But these students can stay from the time formal schooling is done, normally at 18 until 21, just to work on transitional skills. So here, immediately following graduation, Kevin will participate in one of two age-appropriate community and individual community-based activities per week related to horticulture, socialization with young, and music. So what are these transition services? Let me go back here. Student reaches 16. They have an annual review just like they did the other IEP. The appropriate and measurable post-secondary goals based on age-appropriate transitions. Services need to assist the child in reaching these goals, and beginning not later than 1 year before the child reaches the age of majority, a statement that the child has been informed of the child's rights and will transfer to the child at the age of majority. I thought that's what would be in here. Let me see if I can find that. So, transition services. Coordinated set of transition-related strategies and activities in the areas of instruction, employment, community experiences, independent living, related services, and if necessary, daily living and functional vocational assessments. Okay, so that's what this service has to be about. That's what this is all for. Each student's post-secondary goals, the team identifies at least one instructional strategy, experience, and activity to assist the student in reaching it. And of course, who is responsible also for implementing this? Mazzotti, how you like that name, and colleagues in all describe the following transition services to support students' goals and training. Employment of completing a welding course and getting job and entry-level welder. Job safety instruction, community-based experiences related to automotive construction, and work-based experiences for a local welder. All be things to work with. Decisions about needing transition services should be guided by answers to questions such as the following. And here's a whole list of people that help put that list together. What are their strengths? How can she build them to facilitate a successful transition? What skills does a student need to develop to improve and make progress towards post-secondary goals? Will the student seek a regular high school diploma? Will she work towards vocational completion? is a student likely to remain in high school throughout the maximum age of eligibility, which is what age? Right, 21. If so, what curriculum experience will they need past age 21? In what school or community activities will a student participate? So think of this. If they're not participating in things in the community now, that's one of the things they got to start doing on this plan. Does she have expressed career interests now? And that I found very low, is their career interests. And what supports are necessary for them to do that? And what about these goals? Each post-secondary goal, at least one IEP goal must be written that helps the student make progress towards this. 15.3 show those goals aligned with one or more post-secondary goals. Secondary special educators are becoming increasingly skilled in creating instructional materials and activities, and I think that's more important than that. And that was me. I was involved in activities, and that was some kind of a work simulation or work program, work things to prepare them for that. Okay. And then you coordinate these services with adult agencies. Here is, that's something else. I thought it talked about here. Instructional agencies, IEP goals, teach academic and translation, involve interdisciplinary teaming, and then a summary of that performance. 2006 federal legislation added a new transition-related requirement. Yay! Made all special ed teachers happy. Another federal government requirement. Yay! Every student who exits special ed services through graduation or by exceeding goal, exceeding the age of eligibility, the student must receive a summary of performance, a SOP. A SOP. The SOP summary of the student's performance and academic achievement and functional performance, a specific recommendation of what the student should do to continue progressing toward his or her goals, and the kinds of community-based education, training, and vocational things. All right. And with every step of this planning, the student should take an active role. And that's the first time they mention this, but one thing about when you get to this age, the student has to be part of the IEP team. Even if they're severely disabled, if they can have any input at all, they need to be part of the team, be invited, and if all possible, have them at these planning meetings. Types of services and supports are likely needed in the future. Student may develop a better understanding of their needs. And the other thing is, you want to start getting the student familiar with these agencies and what they do, and more so, the people. And so once I worked with them, I never held these meetings without vocational rehabilitation being involved or any other agency. So at our IEP meetings, it was not unusual to have 2 or 3 outside agency people sit in these IEP meetings. Here's a look at some of those goals. Here back to Allison with just the mild disabilities. Develop algebra skills and algebra. Why? Because she wants to go to post-secondary school. Okay, and then Jody has this mild disability, focused directly on Jody's post-secondary goal. Then Kevin, more severe, he tends to stay in school till 21 and 3 more years of service. And talks about here what his goals are. So let's talk about employment. That's the big one here. Remember the 3 domains here: employment, independent living, and rec and leisure. All your stuff revolves around those 3. Rec and leisure means, community connection. So first, and probably the biggest, is employment. I'll just highlight that for you. Work can be defined as using one's physical or mental energies to accomplish something productive. Our society is based on a work ethic. It's interesting because we have more people out of the workforce in the history of this country, and we have more people drawing disability benefits. It has doubled in the last 5 years for some reason. They say it's the new welfare is being disabled. So we're built on a work ethic, but it's rapidly changing, and I'm calling on you, teachers, to help reverse this with kids. place a high value on work and on people who contribute. Besides providing economic support, work offers opportunities for social interaction, and this is what people don't realize. And this is even what I say, people that are on disability or are unemployed, is you lose this social interaction, this reason, and a chance to use and enhance skills in the chosen area. Work generates the respect of others and provides a sense of pride, and this is what I saw in kids. The ones that were actively employed had this sense of pride and this self-satisfaction that really can't be replicated. And that's what's so sad, to see so many people not working. And of course, with that, individuals with disabilities who are employed report a higher quality life. They have more money, yes, but they have the sense of pride, self-satisfaction, and social interaction with other people. And you think of the relationships you have with people that you've worked with. It's just some kind of a friendship that automatically develops. Okay. So how do we begin? Let me just see what we got here. Is defined as using a physical of this, productive, most adults with disabilities obtaining a major life challenge and goal. So you begin this early. Elementary students like sample different types of classroom responsibilities. So that's how you start this. What was really a big, you try and do this with all kids, but kids with disabilities, that's their first thing to career education is classroom responsibilities. Then middle school, spend time at actual community job sites. High school, develop and operate school-based business enterprises. Okay. Let me just go back and take a look at this. Developing career awareness vocational during the elementary years does not mean placing 8-year-old on a job. Appropriate work-related curriculum instruction of which should be selected at each level. For example, elementary students might sample different types of jobs through the classroom responsibilities, such as watering the plants, cleaning backboards, taking messages to the office. Just some type of responsibility. Middle school students begin to spend time at actual community job sites with an increasing amount of time instruction devoted to the development of associated work skills, such as being on time, hygiene, and asking for help and accepting directions. So this will be our number 3 right here, is you put examples of elementary, middle school, and high school from page 535. And then it goes here, a school-based business enterprise can help with students learn functional academic work problem solving. This. 4 school-based business students with disabilities in several high schools had developed and operate. An espresso and baked goods bar? Yum. Takeout meals operation? Yum. And mail order seed business and winter produce garden. Yay. Those will all be excellent. And if you're at a school in this serving these kids, why don't you go ahead and start some of these school-based businesses for your kids with disabilities? I will come and help you establish this, and it will be a great thing for all kids, but especially your kids with disabilities, because that's who you will serve, are the other kids. So that would be number 3. So then, what about competitive employment? When does that happen? Federal law defines federal competitive employment as work and competitive labor on a full or part-time basis. Grading say that earns at or above federal minimum wage, but not less than the customary wage and level of benefits paid to the employer for similar work provided. In other words, you can't hamstring these kids. You can't, if they're professional welders and the going rate is $30 an hour, you can't get a kid with disability to weld for 10. Supposedly prohibited. Virtually all special educators who have studied the transition of students with disabilities from school to work, or school to adult life, let me get this over here, believe that only through significant revisions of the public school curriculum and improved coordination of school and adult vocational services can the prospect of competitive employment be enhanced. So that would be obviously, the ultimate goal of this is competitive employment. So let's look at this here. This is interesting too. There are different things you can do, like in elementary school, for domestic things, community things, leisure, vocational things. And then middle school and high school. Ooh, handle family laundry. We're trying to start that now in our house. And pay bills. Get kids used to handling money. And we're trying to do that long before high school. Because we would like to create little independent people also that can go and live on their own. So what is this here? It's performed work by an employer, functions in an integrated setting with coworkers without disabilities, and earns at or above minimum wage. All right. Shows a positive correlation between paid work experiences during the last 2 years of high school and post-school employment and total earnings. So you want to get them started in some type of employment in those last 2 years of high school. That's what I did. I helped kids on IEPs find part-time jobs in the community to get this work experience. Seems so long ago. Students should experience community jobs that match their vocational interests, and that was a challenge. Because we do these assessments, determine what they're interested in, and then my job was to run around and try and find some kind of a part-time job that matched that. Here, this person described how Christopher, a 17-year-old with a moderate intellectual disabilities, used the Choose and Take Action vocational assessment software to select an entry-level job he would like to observe. First choice making, Chris viewed pairs of randomly presented videos, different employment settings, activities, and videos aren't the same as actually doing the job. And then they planned. Here's showing these videos, and you decide if you want to be able to do that. That's a nice piece of software that allows that. Then you try it, then you evaluate it. And that's really the strength of this community-based systems, is they get to try a bunch of different simulated things also. But that's the only way any of us know what jobs are a lot of times, is that we try it and study it. That's why so many of us go into jobs that our dads do, because we know what those jobs are. And that's how we choose those. Stress functional skills, receive ample opportunities to learn, begin community-based work experience as early as age 10 to 13 for severe disabilities. And sometimes we had them in school. When I was teaching middle school, the kids with severe disabilities did things like went around and picked up all the recycling stuff, or went around and took all the lunch things down, went around and took all the attendance things down and stuff like that. They had jobs in the school to simulate this. So supported employment. Competitive employment at an integrated setting with ongoing support services for individuals. Integrated means that there's non-disabled people there also. Ongoing support individuals for whom competitive employment has not traditionally occurred, or whom competitive employment has been interrupted, who because of the nature and severity of their disability need intensive supported employment services. Meaning some supported employment, difference competitive is by yourself, supported is there's somebody, someone, something that helps you with this. And then transitional employment for individuals with most severe disabilities and mental illness. Supported employment has grown rapidly since its inception. In '86, fewer than 10,000. And almost all the kids I worked with had some supported employment. Whether it was a job coach, the most common one was some kind of a support to the employer. They got some kind of a financial support or financial incentive to work with kids that had disabilities. This is interesting too. The success of supported employment depends in large part on job development, and that was my title, job developer. The identification and creation of community-based employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities. 4 distinct models of supported employment have evolved: small business enterprise, mobile work crews, work enclave, and individual placement. And I am going to say to you, you get to describe examples of all 4 of those, and this is number 4 right here. And it starts right here. What is a small business enterprise? Employment for people with disabilities by establishing business that takes advantage of existing commercial opportunities in the community. The business hires a small number of individuals with disabilities as well as several employees without disabilities, and they work together. Most common one I'm familiar with is cleaning crews. You've got to have some that have disabilities, but some that don't. Then a mobile work crew. Single-purpose business such as buildings or grounds maintenance, working on integrated community employment settings. Okay, so what is the mobile work crew? Then an enclave, support employment group of people with disability perform work with special training or job supports. And then this one, individual placement, consists of developing jobs with employers in the community, systematically assessing clients' performance or preference and jobs. Approach of individual placement used in increasing known as customized employment entails carving out or creating a job within an integrated environment. Customized employment is a value exchange between the employer and the employee based on what needs they have. Supported self-employment offers other possibilities for meaningful employment. In other words, for example, the one time I thought was so cool that there was a printing place and there was one job where they needed somebody just to clean out these ink containers. And where the employer thought there was a need for these kids that I worked with was he didn't want to pay, he was paying his printers high wages, and he didn't want to have to pay them the high wages to stop every so often and clean these. So he hired one of my students to clean, that was his full-time job, 4 hours a day, was to clean these ink containers out. And I would call that customized employment thing. Okay? And then employment specialist, do we have this? Yes. Like a job coach. And I hired job coaches that worked with kids, and that's what you would do. Somebody would hire the student, then you would send an adult that would do that job at the same time or work with them. Supported employment specialist is the key to making supported employment work. The supported employment specialist, sometimes called a job coach or employment consultant, is a community-based professional who works in a non-profit job placement program, a public vocational or adult services program, or a special ed program. Provides direct on-job site training to the employee with disability and serves as a primary source of support. And I thought that was one of the more successful things I did in my program, was send job coaches along. It would be like sending a teacher out there with them. The job coach gradually reduces the time spent in direct on-site training and support. This model of outside assist has several inherent drawbacks. But that's where you go into the process with the intent of the job coach gradually being there less. That it's not a successful match if the job coach perpetually has to stay there. But here are the drawbacks of having a job coach there. The arrival and presence of the job coach can disrupt the natural work setting, because that person becomes very dependent on the job coach. May perform differently in the presence of the job coach. Like a parent, job coach presence can reduce the frequency of interactions between that employee and others. It's difficult for the employment specialist to be sensitive to the changing demands of the job over time. The cost for an employment specialist who must travel on the job site is higher, and the efficiency of the approach is lower than one takes advantage of. So the travel is an issue. And always on-call job coach may prevent employer coworkers from figuring out and implementing natural solutions. Why? Because the job coach always takes care of it. What are natural supports? That's where other employees take over. And the natural cues in self-management. Okay? And so this will be number 5 down here. You address these. And I will tell you, there's quite a few questions on the test about these very specific areas. What are they, and who would be best suited to them? Okay. And let's move on. So we had supported employment, and then another level. This is still all about supported employment. Sheltered employment. That's the next level. It refers to a work by people with disabilities in an accredited occupationally oriented facility, including a work activity center operated by a private nonprofit agency, which, except for administrative and support staff, employs disabled people certified under special provisions of the Mental Freedom Management Act. Sheltered employment is the most common type of vocational activity for adults with severe disabilities. Did you know that? I did. National Survey of Employment programs funded by state agencies serving this population found that this many were there, roughly 4 times the number of people with intellectual disabilities. So sheltered employment, here's sheltered workshops. Provide one or more of 3 types of programs: evaluation and training for community-based, extended long-term employment, and work activities. Here they are. Sheltered workshops. And that's also known as sheltered employment. Problems with sheltered employment include limited job opportunity replacement and low pay, and very hard, I think, to transition to regular pay, to regular jobs. A work center activity offers this. Offers programs of activities for individuals are viewed by local decision makers who serve a productive work. Many sheltered workshops offer both transitional and extended employment. Transitional meaning starting in the workshop and then trying to get them into competitive employment in their community. And this is about how they can be paid paid here. Are operated to provide whatever training they're needed. The wage and division of labor allows sheltered workshops to pay employees hourly wages based on the employee's ability to produce in relation to non-disabled. So it's what we call piecework. Workshops are required to determine prevailing wage rates for like-type work done by experienced workers in the surrounding communities, and then they're evaluated on this once every 6 months. For example, if an employee is producing 50 units per hour and the competitive standard is 100, what do you think they'll be paid? Then they'd be paid half of that wage. And what I saw was they would be down to 10% or less. But nonetheless, they got a check for the amount of work they did. Most special educators and related employment professionals no longer consider shelter employment an appropriate transition outcome for young people with disabilities. I don't know. That's hard because some people that are severely disabled can still have a meaningful job there, and I know that society's really down on that. But I saw people very happy there. A sheltered workshop is to train individuals in specific job skills and enable them to obtain competitive employment. However, few employees of sheltered workshops are ever placed in jobs in the community, and that's unfortunate. But it's unfortunate. What my experience of this, and it's politically incorrect, like so many things I say. The students, the adults that worked there didn't care. They liked being there. They liked familiarity. They liked knowing what was going to happen. So, and many who are placed in jobs can't keep those jobs, and they come back. I believe that the poor competitive employment record of shelter workshop graduates may indicate the limitations inherent. So this, should we let them sit home and do nothing instead of be in the workshop? employment is conducted in segregated settings, and that's what their problem is, because it's not in an integrated setting. So that's one thing we could possibly offer, is have abled people come in and work in the same settings and work at 100% rate, while these others are worked at a less rate. Here's TASH. This is a thing on what TASH says can be done. So you want to read through that. I'm going to take that question off the test about TASH, I think, though. So what about post-secondary education? Going to college no longer a fantasy for individuals. Let me check this first. Here, post-secondary. Since disabilities institution. 10.8% of all undergraduate students and 7% of graduate students reported having a disability. Did you know that? Most prevalent types of disability reported by post-secondary students is a learning disability. 31% of people identified themselves having a disability. 18% ADHD. Another health impaired. Okay. Secondary may have important for people with disabilities. So it's hard for these folks. Students with significant disabilities such as intellectual disabilities, autism. Some school districts allow students who require special ed services past the age of 18 to graduate non-disabled continue educational programs at the school. I think it's now some schools are offering some kind of a post-secondary experience. So let me look at that with you. Significantly improves the chance of meaningful employment. Increases jobs, require technical training, problem solving. That's a hard one. And this, and I worked with a lot of kids that didn't have interpersonal skills. Growing. Participation in the labor force rises to 50% for individuals with disabilities who obtain a 4-year degree. That's phenomenal. Even youth with significant disabilities can participate in some aspect of college life, and that's what we're seeing. That's why that number's high, because we're taking really watered down things just to give kids with disabilities that college life experience, even though it's nothing like regular college, but at least they still get that. In fact, I used to remember the kids would say they were going to college even though it was just some kind of a post-secondary experience of some kind. Measured by graduation is well below the students without disabilities. And that you can't be surprised by that, right? That they don't finish 4-year degrees or 2-year degrees or even certification things. That can't be too surprising. So let's talk about independent or living arrangements. We talked about work. Now let's talk about where we're going to live. Okay. And so we have apartment living, like apartment clusters, co-residence apartments, maximum independent apartments. I'm going to ask you what number are we on here. This is number 6. You get to bring this in and tell me about each of these, what they are and who, and that comes right here from page 544 and 545. All right, and then foster homes. By temporary residential service also has more opportunity to interact with, accepted by community at large. Then group homes. Can you tell me who here also? This would be number 7. Who benefits from this? And then number 8 down here, who on group homes? Who would go in there, and a little bit about that. All right. And what about supported living? Let's take a look at that. Helping people with disabilities live in the community as independently as normal as possible. Supported living is a lot like supported employment. Innovative models of residential Students with disabilities have been developed based on the belief of residential placements must be adapted to the needs of persons with disabilities. Supported living helps people with disabilities live in the community as independently as possible. With supported employment provides ongoing individual supports. They work in community-based employment settings. Supported living entails personalized network of various types of levels of natural supports. So, did they explain that well? Let me just give you this on page 548. Klein explains that supported living is by describing what it is not. There are no criteria for participation. People in this program must be able to cook for themselves, have a physical disability, need more or less than 3 hours per day of attendant care, and have visual impairments. Supported living is not based on readiness and movement through a continuum. Participation in the traditional residential services is based on a professional's assessment of the person's readiness or ability to live in a particular program. And the person must perform well in order to move to the next, less restrictive run on the continuum. Guiding principles of supported living are described on 15.7. So you have supported living, and another one is institutions. Criticized in the 60s and 70s for their inability to provide the individual services in a comfortable, humane, normalized way, they've become deinstitutionalized. The movement of people with disabilities out of large institutions and into small, community-based living environments has been active reality for the last 40 years. Still some need for them, but a real movement away. Conditions of this exposed 45 years ago in the book Christmas in Purgatory. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare Commission talked about this. Okay. Movement to deinstitutionalize people. Let's talk about rec and leisure, the fun part, because we have a third of our life that is work, a third of our life that is sleep. Here's the third of our life that gets us in trouble, is rec and leisure. They do not come easily for many adults with disabilities, and certainly not for kids either. Write that right here. Challenges to the use of community rec resources include how to get there, transportation, their ability to do or to play the game, or other willing and able friends to whom to go with them. Huh? Yeah, that's what the problem is. There's a nice image here of doing dance. Must realize the importance of including training for rec and leisure curricula of school-age children with disabilities. Learning appropriate rec and leisure is particularly important for adults with severe disabilities. Now, like at the Skyforce, I can't tell you, we have some regular season ticket holders that come that follow the Skyforce. That is their rec and leisure. They know all the players. They know all the things that are going on. They never miss a game. You often see folks with disabilities come to movies or high school games and stuff, and generally in group homes and stuff, it's group outings. But staff have to help them manage this rec and leisure time, that other third, that other 8 hours. That they have some orchestration for sleep, they have some orchestration for work, but this has to be taught directly and overtly, directly on rec and leisure. So the ultimate goal is a better quality of life. This all goes on about this. Been different conceptions and definitions of quality of life, based on even whether it can be measured and recommendations. And what I found, like I say, at times, I thought that this was more about the adults than it was about the kids. That the kids didn't feel they needed as much of this. Person with intellectual disabilities. Questionnaire things, job make you feel good, constantly trying to measure So this is about the misguided and limiting presumptions like handicapism, biased reactions toward people with disabilities, and they try and make an equate here to racism, that it's like racism. I don't know. This self-advocacy, because personal professional societies, self-advocacy and termination with this have begun to assert their legal rights. Still a long way to go. And this is what you help them do in school. If there's one thing you do as a teacher, is you help them assert for themselves. I call it you help them advocate for themselves, speak up for themselves of what their interests and things they want to do and stuff. And sometimes that's hard to do to get them to that point, but still a long way to go. So there you have it. Chapter 15, Transitions, School Transitions in Special Ed.